Hi, and welcome back to the Store Hero podcast. Today, we're joined by e-commerce veteran in Ireland, Ciaran Crean, founder of Wave OMS. Very welcome to the show, Ciaran. Really glad to have you on board today.
Great. Thanks very much, guys. Delighted to be invited.
Yeah, no worries at all. As always, really great to start with our guest by asking, I suppose, how did you get into e-commerce? What was the initial straw that brought you in, I suppose?
Jesus. Well, while I'm now the CEO of Wave, I suppose we have a sister business that we spun Wave out of, mixgarage.com. Mixgarage.com will celebrate its 20th anniversary next February. So a veteran for sure. And we I suppose how we get into it, it's kind of accidental to a great degree. My background, or my brother's background, the Mick of Mick's Garage, we're both software engineers by trade. Back in 2003, we were young, we were looking to do something for ourselves, didn't necessarily know what it was. Mick was keen to build a website, just get into kind of online technology. I was working with Accenture, BMC Software, KPMG as contract implementing Siebel CRM systems, and we had a way into the automotive industry relative to the parts and accessories. So we said, look, let's build a website, parts accessories. We launched it on the 2nd of February 2004, and took it from there. So it's purely accidental relative to getting into the e-commerce sector. Neither of us have had any experience with it at that time.
It's funny how it's often a similar situation when we talk to different e-commerce store owners or people in the sector. That's not often as much of a prescribed plan or on the vision board 20 years all mapped out in kind of even steps. So I think ultimately, obviously, you've seen a lot of success with Mick's Garage, and I'm sure have seen the ups and downs and have grown any sort of business on a daily basis. You're faced with reality and all, balancing those different hats. If you can take a step back, it's not often a case that you can see a business can actually sustain itself, let alone grow for 2 decades. Is there particular principles you think really stood, whether it's the product team, operation, that you feel has really stood to the business over those 20 years?
Yeah, I think, like when we look at the 20 years, what we've kind of rolled through, we rolled through like the collapse of Lehman's in 2008, the financial collapse, right through to recession, into Brexit and everything to do with that, roll into COVID, etc. So I think what underlying the business is a number of things. It's obviously having a very good team, a very good core team who constantly and consistently believes in the business. And that core team has a complete buy-in of the sound financial principles that we need to run a business and to make sure that we are still here able to have the capital to grow, to invest in the business in all elements of the business, and equally to ensure that everybody is very, very very happy that we are there for the long term to grow. And I think with the living of time that we're there, for sure, we've kind of demonstrated that. So like any business, it has to be sound financial principles. We're not in it. There was a time we probably were, but for sure in the last number of years, we're not in it to grow at all costs. That's just not us. So we're not out there raising 40, 50, 60 million looking for world domination, where you run at a loss, and hopefully the metrics that you bring to bear at the end of the day will allow you to claw yourself back out of the mire, and hey presto, you show an unbelievable bottom line, which is very hard to achieve in e-commerce, that type of metric. So for us, it's been very, very sound financial principles. How can we ensure that we keep our business lean, make sure we've got 100% amazing efficiency there, looking at our costs, looking at our metrics. How can we, and across all the business, how do we buy better to ensure that we have presented a competitive proposition to our customers and still have a decent margin to allow us to buy better all the ranges again, and look at that. And equally, like from all elements of the business, which I'm sure we'll touch on the P&L, where you guys excel on, to make sure you're acquiring your customer at a good ROI, getting the products out there very efficiently and at a low cost to customer. You acquire margin, acquire margin on a product, so you've got a good product margin, and then what the contribution margin is to ensure that you've got a very lean OPEX that can deliver that and push for growth. So we're all about running a great business with very, very sound financial principles.
Really interesting. I mean, going back to 2004, ecom has changed incredibly. You mentioned you were a software engineer, and you probably needed to be a software engineer to build a website that you could sell on in 2004 to some extent. I suppose one piece we often talk to our customers about is customer acquisition. You kind of touched on it there. 2004 is pre-Facebook. Twitter didn't exist. Going back to 2004, how did you guys get the name about Mick's Garage out there? I mean, like, even going like our family business at home was ecom back in 2004 as well, and you know, in buying stuff off the internet back then, it was almost a scam to most people. So there was an advertising piece, but there was always an education. You know, we're legit here. How did you guys approach that back in 2004?
Yeah, I mean, we took whatever avenue we could, right? You know, because we were kind of unique and new to the sector. Now we're going back a bit now, Thomas, obviously, but because we're kind of unique and new to the sector, PR opportunities came quite easy for us. Came quite easy for us. So a lot of traditional advertising at the time, and just kind of guerrilla marketing, grunting it out. Like it was even the Boys for Toys show, which was a thing back in the day. Like we would get flyers done or air fresheners that stand outside because we couldn't afford to go in outside the audience and hand them out, our flyers and be chased away on that. You know, we used to Vistaprint was only kicking off then, so we used to invest our money in getting freight magnets, mickscars.com, car parts, accessories. And Mick and I would cycle around a lot of the suburbs in Dublin and actually stick them to the car parking meters. So it was a lot of grill, a lot of grunt. But then when the online opportunities came relative to your PPC marketing, etc., we embraced that. And here's a fun fact. We were one of the first Irish companies to advertise on Facebook, and we were getting a click at a cent to go.
Well,
cent to go. Yeah. So we could not spend enough. Like literally, we could not spend enough on Facebook. And so, you know, where it was cheap and cheerful back then, we piled in. Of course, we piled in. And for sure, that provided us with the foundation to grow the business 2004, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and thereon, you know.
Definitely, and I think it's so underrated, and it's not even. We'd be even conscious of skipping over that focus on those fundamental financial principles, and for all the reasons why those components may have actually been difficult for yourself to pull together, it took that extra considered effort, and in doing so, you're forced to reckon with the unit economics of the business. Whereas if you're, for example, working backwards, you would have went in and maybe got a quote for X number of fridge magnets, and therefore you have a defined costs. In terms of at least the deliverable you're getting, it might have returned a different level of customers depending on where that magnet went, but you'd a much healthier sound view. And even in the context of the Facebook ads, you were in a position that, okay, well, the cost was so low that you knew and you could be confident that you had scope within the cost of sale in order to factor that in. I think it's important when people oftentimes don't have an opportunity to drill down on. I think from your perspective, do you see now, especially as you're kind of seeing this on the Wave OMS side, do you see particular challenges that e-commerce brands make when it comes to customer acquisition, or around kind of maybe not having as much of a sound financial approach to it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the caveat is to some degree, it's a completely different game today than it was 20 years ago. You know, there's so many different avenues to acquire a customer, and yes, you know, some of them were as valid back then. You know, if you're a cosmetics brand or maybe a D2C, which wasn't necessarily a word at the time, you would have advertised on probably, you know, maybe Image Magazine or whatever was going back then. You know, whereas now, you know, it's there's so many outlets and so many media and online publishers that would very, very happily take your budget. You know, and it's practically endless. You know, so I think it was a lot narrower back then. Your avenues relative to acquiring a customer were so much tighter that it was actually, to some degree, you know, I won't say it was certainly easier from a marketing standpoint, because it didn't necessarily, they weren't, you know, TikTok and Facebook and, you know, Google to an extent, and Yahoo, and like, you know, the avenues were very, very tight on that. So, you know, but whereas today whereas today, and so we could bootstrap an e-com business and get to scale because we would kind of grew with the platforms, right? And at a lower cost, and we had to because we didn't necessarily have a wage coming in. We had to sell a product, we had to make a margin, and that paid for everything to do with the business. I think today is widely different. I think you have to be an awful lot more informed than potentially, particularly in your trial and error, because a trial on TikTok or a trial on Google, all of a sudden 20 grand, bang, gone. So unless you really know your audience, you know your product, you know where your customers live, where they're consuming their media, and you're pretty sure that your unit metrics and your competitive nature and everything aligns correctly, which means you can pull it back with an ROI that suits your business. Any DTC and your margin 70-80%, well, okay, your ROI metrics are somewhat different than someone who's basically just a reseller product, right? So yeah, it is a lot more challenging, but to some degree, some of the fundamentals are exactly the same. I think the fundamentals are the same. You have to provide a good product at a good price and a great service, and that has stood the test of time over centuries. So I think yes, you have to test. Of course, you have to test, but you also have to know where to deploy your funds in a way that's going to deliver you that constant incremental growth. Unless you're VC backed and you've got a tank of cash behind you, very few people can turn around and whack 100K on that, test that, see where that comes in, and you have to duck and turn and twist to ensure that becomes that 100K spend. Now the following month or 2 months on, I'm getting the same return for 30K because I know exactly where my ROI metrics and customer live.
Really, really interesting. It is. You're jumping through hoops every day of the week now to try and figure. It's so dynamic and so different. Like your spend one day, you could spend the exact same, and the return is fantastic. And the next day, you spend the same. Business looks the exact same, but the return mightn't be as good. And it's just so dynamic and different every day of the week. I'm sure there's plenty of people listening here who are crying at the thoughts of 1 cent clicks from Facebook because that's kind of gone, I suppose.
Well, that's a long time ago now. You need a time machine to go. You need a time machine to go and get that. But equally though, Thomas, this is important to know where you won't get a return. So for that reason, like on the mixedgarage.com side, they necessarily won't play on certain acquisition pitches to a great degree because for our audience or for our product, we won't get a return there. So we don't waste time constantly knocking on that door.
And like, I suppose you run into the dream scenario to some extent that a lot of e-commerce founders, when they set up their first business, dream about is like, okay, now we've got tons of orders coming in. The next problem you ran into is, okay, how do we manage this? I mean, myself and Carl popped out to the Mixed Garage warehouse there just before Christmas, and I think we were both blown away to the level of organization. I mean, you have this down to a T, but I'm sure that probably came as a massive result of trial and error. And I suppose you've seen plenty of warehouses over the years, and even from your own experience with Mixed Garage, getting that initial influx of orders, it's not the sexy part of e-com that everyone thinks about. You think about your marketing and you think about your products. You don't think about the back-end warehouse operations of the business. What mistakes did you make over the years, and what learnings did you take about how to really optimize that back-end process? That, it's just as important, if not more important, than a lot of the other areas of e-com that maybe get more attention.
Yeah, I mean, like ultimately, you could have in e-commerce, you could have the best product in the world. You could have the best acquisition team in the world. You could have the best customer service team in the world. But if you're not, the last touch point to your customer in the e-com space is getting the product to the customer. And if you're not doing that well, then your acquisition efforts, your brilliant customer service, your amazing product, the shine comes off that if the customers are not being delivered within their expectations. As simple as that. We had huge amounts of learnings over the years. I mean, as I said, we came from a software background, so that physicality, that warehouse space, the zones, the bins, the racks, locations, the operational processes, and everything around that. Like we had to learn and scramble that, and which we did. So, like again, we've been 20 years owning warehouses of various sizes. From our first warehouse is 2,000 square feet, and now across 3 locations we have just shy of 80,000 square feet. 2 warehouses in Ireland and one in the UK. So, we had to kind of make the mistakes, and we made the mistakes. I mean, I could, this podcast isn't long enough to tell you about all the mistakes that we've made relative to warehousing and operations. But in doing so, Mick who's our CTO, is a complete process freak, and he's constantly looking at where's the efficiencies can I achieve within the operational sense, right? To the point that, like, a number of years ago, he'd have Fitbits on our guys to, discovering the length of travel, how much walking are they doing, where are they doing that, right? And then once you have the data and the metrics, you can actually derive a process that makes sure that we cut down on various elements of it. Because, like, ultimately, when you're talking about getting orders at the door, unless you're uber scale, right, where you have probably robotics doing it, and most e-commerce businesses live in the real world, and we have a warehouse team of pickers and packers and supervisors and managers, who are responsible for getting orders at the door. So and that is expensive. It is an expensive method of getting product at the door. So you have to make sure that you're actually minded everything, and that you've got the best processes for your business to ensure that you're getting the product at the door quickly, within expectation, at the lowest possible cost, at the highest level of service. So that probably kind of leads on to Wave OMS, where over the years we started with manual processes, and then we brought in various systems and various algorithms to help us to come at the process, and we literally have a fine-tuned to a great degree. Thankfully, just before COVID hit, we arrived at a process where it's almost like the eureka moment, where Mick kind of came out of the room going, I have it, this is it. So basically, you arrived at a process which literally took all control away from the warehouse. It's very much an autonomous process, and that's an internal product to mixgarage.com, as the entire tech stack for Mixgarage actually is proprietary. But during the COVID, actually, we found that we were getting some knocks on the door from some well-known Irish retailers who, 90% of the business was through their stores, their footfall, but 10% was online. And that might have represented, 10 or 5% online might represent maybe 50, 60, 100 hours a day. And overnight, COVID, the store shuts, and that 50, 60 day goes to 600, 700, 800 hours a day. And their existing, I suppose, ERP manual-driven operational processes, which they were okay with, right? They lived with on the normal times where the order volume wasn't there, just quite clearly just didn't cut the mustard when it came to actually delivering product at volume out the door. And one of actually the retailers that came in to visit us, said, look, will you sell us the product? Will you sell us the process? So Wave OMS was born from that. We did. And then thereafter, we've been successfully introducing the Wave OMS process to customers ever since.
It's a great way to approach it, by nature of the fact that obviously not only was it a lived problem, you ultimately were forced in those kind of extreme, while it's taken as a given, at this point for everyone, but edge cases such as a pandemic that ultimately aren't often, big surges in sales often not factored in, big shifts in the representation of sales across your kind of distribution channels. I think ultimately, how did that process go? Ultimately, from there, you needed to bring that from an in-house solution to an external opportunity for other businesses. What was the process like to transition that into that first customer?
Yeah, I mean, the first customer, they were typically doing about 100 hours a day. They literally very quickly went up to 800 hours a day. They were feeling the pain. They were really feeling the pain, right? They were like, 4 or 5 days behind on orders. They couldn't get out fast enough. They were running almost 24-hour shifts, which is all good and well. And they kind of going, look, this is brilliant. We're getting orders at the door. But, coming into the month or into the quarter, when you look at your P&L and you're finding, well, actually, hold on a second here. We sent out XYZ orders. The revenue looked terrific. Product is going out the door. We're happy. But actually, look at the cost of actually getting that done, right? So that customer was very, very willing to work with us as we productized the process that we have and brought Wave OMS to light to a great degree. So that was driven by our CTO and the tech team. They carved it out, put it into a separate process, put everything around it relative to hosting, infrastructure, security, user logins, DC, multi-DC structures, and everything that required for it to be a standalone product, and then we rolled it out from there. You mentioned the relative to surge and COVID, and yes, every shit fest presents an opportunity, and for us that was our opportunity. However, there's no wrong time, and even today, there's no wrong time for a warehouse to move away from manual, paper-based processes to systemic processes, because whether there's a COVID and there's an imperative need to do that, because you literally can't see the wood for the trees. Even today, and thankfully that's where we see the opportunity for Wave OMS, where you got a lot of B2C, B2B, B2C and B2B businesses who are still literally leaning on paper, single order at a time based processes, and who can get the efficiency that Wave OMS delivers, as has been discovered by our first customers as they come through COVID.
I think, as you mentioned there, you've just touched on one thing that definitely stood out to me anyway, when we actually got a sense of the experience, was a shift in approach from order by order to a different dynamic in terms of how to run an operation efficiently. And there's a point at which order by order is maybe sustainable, but that tipping point exists for many, that there's ultimately massive wastage within their current operations because people are still operating on that. Maybe you can just give people some context on what that kind of mindset shift or operational shift looks like.
Yeah, so on an order by order basis, right? So if you take we would say a real warehouse environment. So a real warehouse environment is usually a warehouse that, yes, it's a box, but it might have a mezzanine, it might have a storage office at the back, etc. There's various elements to a warehouse. And if you're let's say you got 400 orders to pick on a Monday morning, and within that you got literally you could be picking those single orders at a time on a tablet, or typically an A4 pick sheet. So very often a picker picks up a pick sheet and walks to the warehouse and picks 5 items. I need to go here, and you bring that back. Depending on the product. So you're talking about 5 items. I mean, if your average order value, let's say, is €60, let's say you're making a margin of a healthy margin, and there's €30 profit there. If it takes one person 15 minutes to go and pick that order around the warehouse of 5 different items, 15 minutes, let's say minimum wage €12, that's 15 minutes by 3 euros. So all of a sudden 10% of your gross profit, 10% of your profit is consumed by somebody walking around picking that order, right? And that doesn't take into account inefficiencies relative, is a product there? It doesn't take into account picking the wrong item, etc., particularly if it's manual processes, and then inefficiency going out the door. Multiply that by 400 times a day, right? Then the metrics start to stand up. And then if you're picking manually and you have an inherent mispick, incorrect product problem going out to customers. If you don't, it means that you're picking manually, that the order typically has a sheet. And do you ever get an order coming in the door where it has a pick sheet, and the pick sheet might have a black pen against it, tick, 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 and then it might have a red pen against it, tick, 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 right? So that's a business that's doing everything in its power in a manual sense to make sure you're getting the correct product 100% of the time, but they're doubling the resource cost to do it, because the picker goes tick, 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 and then the QA person goes bang, bang, bang on that. And if they're not doing that, then the businesses typically have a 2 to 3% 2% error rate going out the door, or 2 or 3% error rate going out the door, right? Let's say you're doing 150 euros a day, and the average order value is, let's say, 60 euros, and you have a 2% mispick rate. That's 3 orders going out the day wrong. That's 180 euros, or 3,600 euros a month, approximately 43,000 euros of product going out the door wrong on 150 euros a day on a 2% mispick rate, right? It really mounts up pretty quickly. But relative to Carl, the process that we take it. So businesses, most warehouses are an order-driven business. Picking one order at a time. You might have someone that might order the sheets and maybe go and pick 2 to 3 orders at a time, right? And that to try and get extra efficiencies through that process. We've come across businesses where what they do is they download all the order items into an Excel file, and then they group the items. Go, look, I need to get 5 of those, 6 of those, 7 of those, etc. And they bring it back, but they have a manual sort problem thereafter. How do I sort all that items thereafter? What Wave does is that Wave basically moves people away from an order-driven process to a product-driven process. So what we do is we deconstruct all the orders that comes in. So they can come in from many sources, from Shopify store, 3 Shopify stores, your ERP, 2 Shopify stores, and Magento store. It doesn't matter. Our biggest, not one of our biggest, sorry, but a customer who's got the widest channels has got 8 stores connected into Wave, right? So all orders come into Wave as a funnel, which fundamentally is a WMS system with a really good pick, sort, pack, ship on top of it. So all the orders come in. We deconstruct all the orders into what's called a real-time pick list, and then the picker basically picks the zone he starts with. So it might be, let's say, mezzanine 1. Picker goes to mezzanine 1, or 2 pickers, or 3 pickers, and mezzanine 1, and they wash all the products out of mezzanine 1 for all orders in the system, right? So literally all the products then are brought back to a central sort area, and we really cool scanner-based algorithm that basically says, look, single item order straight to the packing bench, or multi-item order, that's to be reconstituted over there. So it's very much a systemic-driven, high-volume, massive efficiency on the pick, and then a scanner-directed process to bring the orders back to single or multi-item orders, etc. The packers don't know what order they're working on until the pick ticket comes out. Until the ship label comes out of the printer. So that's the fundamental shift. We are Wave, and Wave customers have a product-driven process versus an order-driven process.
Really, really interesting. A couple of things that jumped out to me, I suppose. I'd love to understand when customers come to you. Is there a certain order point? I'm sure it's not revenue, because somebody's selling sofas and somebody's selling, I don't know, $20 t-shirts. The level at which they're going to hit these problems will ultimately depend on the number of orders going through the system. So 2 questions. So typically, when do people start to think they need a platform like this? Is it often too late? Are they coming to you screaming, say, we need it? And secondly, what does onboarding look like? Because you're not implementing an upsell cart app here on a Shopify store. You're really changing everything in the business from a back-end perspective. So it'd be interesting to kind of hear your thoughts on those two.
Yeah. So customers come to us for both of those scenarios, right? So yes, there are customers that kind of go, look, I need something, and I need something yesterday, right? Which is brilliant, and we all love to see those customers come in, right? Because
yes, we do.
It means that they've identified a need, they have the pain, and we have the solution for them. That's fantastic. And equally, there's an education aspect as well to customers. So you might have a customer who has, who's got NetSuite ERP connected into Shopify. They have a all ERP, all EPOS systems have a very basic WMS system attached to it. But yet they're still picking on single pick sheets on pieces of paper, etc. And they have a manual process for better work that works for them, right? Or it could work for them for 10 months a year, but then come November, December, bang, literally they go to war, right? So the Black Friday, particularly if you're a very retail oriented Q4 type of business, and it can be the case where yes, they can come to us screaming, look, I need something, or B, like January and February is brilliant for our business because we get business owners, head of operations, head of e-commerce businesses who are looking at the Q4 stats and going, oh God, I'm tired. We need to correct that for next year, right? So that then they're looking to see what is out there to do that. Or indeed, we could knock on businesses' doors and say, guys, if you have a manual driven process, there is a better way. Let me show you how we do that, right? Relative to our ideal customers, typically high volume, high SKU, one or more warehouses, they're mispicking, they're fed up with the costs against that, they're fed up with the customer service costs, fed up, annoying the customer. The Trustpilot rating is suffering because of it, and ultimately they're looking at the P&L to say, look, how do we bring a level of efficiency here? Very rarely you get a customer coming to us going, look, my operational cost per order at the door is $8.50. And I want to get that down to $2.50. How do I do that? You don't actually get that, which is interesting. Which means that they're not necessarily looking at it down the CapEx, down at the OpEx side, right, relative to the actual unit cost of getting out the door. Because and where you guys are sitting in a very attractive side of the business, right? It's ROI, it's acquisition, it's metrics around that. How do we do more? How do we get more profit, etc. A warehouse, to a lot of people, is a very unsexy side of the business. It's the great ignored side of the business, right? There's no transparency. So ignored. And typically, a lot of business seniors only look at it when there's a problem, right? We've lost a key staff member, or why didn't that order go out, etc., etc. So, So there's a number of reasons why customers come to us and why clients come to us. Relative to the implementation, it really depends. It really depends. We have customers from a volume standpoint. Our lowest order volume customers probably doing about 800 to 900 orders a month, but they're a B2B customer, and their average order could be between 150 to 200 SKUs on that order, right? And our highest volume customer is doing about 40,000 orders a month with us. So, and then we have everything in between, right? So we have a customer coming in actually on who's actually taking the opportunity to come in and have a look to see an operation, and they're doing 15 to 20 orders a day, but the average order value is in the thousands. So for them, it's not necessarily about, look, I need to pick the orders faster. It is actually about accuracy, transparency, regulatory information, audit information, who is doing what, when, right? Because if you get one of those orders out wrong, I mean, that literally could chuck your month out. So for them, so it really depends on every different customer that's coming through. Increasingly, we're finding more customers coming in. There's a statutory obligation to record batch numbers, serial numbers, etc. So therefore, they can do the full traceability on that information if that is called into account. And that's like in the agri-pharmaceutical sector, electronics sector, etc. So when a customer comes in and says, look, we're interested, we obviously, we take them to a call, we do a demo on them. But our implementation process can be, we can get a customer running in 3 weeks, or it could be 3 months. It really depends on, will Wave become the source of truth for your inventory? So are you moving your whole WMS function, goods in, stock counts, stock transfers, all that kind of good audit trail against all that kind of good WMS standard processes? So are you moving that entirely to Wave? So if you are, it means we need to look at your warehouse, your structures, your zones, your picking locations, etc., to ensure that, yes, you've got a brilliant physical warehouse setup, but then systemically, when the process comes on top of that, it works really, a lot sweeter, a lot better, etc. Or are you keeping your source of truth within your ERP? And that may be the case for some businesses where they have wholesale coming off it, they might have store replenishment, they might have other elements to it. So if Wave is not going to be the single driver of your orders at the door, well then the source of truth inventory must reside within your existing ERP. Wave will get a cut of the stock every 15, 20 minutes or every 5 minutes as is required. And then that allows Wave to do its pick, sort, pack, shit hot function on that. So it really kind of depends whether it's a customer who wants us to take a full view of the warehouse, they take a step back. This is what we have. We want to be source of truth. And then we'll come in and do an implementation project, which also involves recommendations and advice around the warehouse itself, etc. But if it's a customer where, let's say, the only tech in their business is Shopify, and we have those customers, and they may have Shopify with, let's say, zero on the far side, right? So there's multiple million euro dollar businesses around with that structure. We literally can plug into Shopify through our, we plug into all the major e-com platforms within 5 minutes, take them through what the warehouse setup should be. We typically on site for training, and bang, you can be live within 2 weeks. Once the training, once you buy the equipment, etc., to do that. So it really depends on who the customer is, how complex the operational element is, and what do they need from us relative to the warehousing to a process that.
It's going to bring everything full circle as well, back to those kind of cheap customer acquisition costs. I think a lot of challenges businesses have faced over the last kind of 2 years is the days of even those kind of post-COVID strong ROAS metrics and cheap customer acquisition metrics has meant that was ultimately the biggest lever for growth in people's hands. They knew that if they spent an extra euro, dollar, or etc. on a paid ad, they could see the bottom line profit of the business. You could see it kind of bear fruit and see the benefits there. And as that's changed, I think a lot of people are forced to look at, okay, what are my levers, not only for growth at all costs, as you've said, but levers for profitability growth. And when it's easy enough to see, okay, we can adjust, the inputs at the very top of that funnel in terms of our marketing spend, or potentially actually have, be crossing our eyes and crossing our fingers and closing our eyes, I should say, around expecting our marketing efficiency to suddenly jump into a place it's never been before. But fundamental components of the business like this could actually be a growth lever for profit, which I think a lot of people don't consider as well. Would that be fair to say?
Look, you're absolutely right. A warehouse can be a black hole for costs. There's cost and margin wins right across the business if you want to look at it. For us, when you're moving from manual to a systemic process, we always say that our businesses can double the volume at the door once they bring Wave into bear. So instantly you can double your growth without adding any additional cost in. Equally, when we're picking all products at once, let's say you go to the shelf and you have to pick that pen, right? So you're asked to pick one of those pens. You do a deal or you get busy, and when you come to the shelf, you're asked to pick 5 of those pens because it could be in 2 or 3 or 1 or how many different orders, right? There's no additional cost relative to picking that product. So whether it's 1 or whether it's 10 or 15 or 20, it doesn't matter. It's a single pick action, but the quantity just changes, right? So with Wave, your growth, it's not a linear growth factor. On manual operations, where you need 100 people, you need, let's say, 3 people to get out 100 orders a day, right? Then you need 6 to get 200. That is a defined cost equation. You can't escape that gravity, I suppose, to a great degree in a manual operation. Whereas in Wave, the busier you are, the more efficient, the lower your cost per order at the door becomes. That's just a fact of it. But then if you're picking, let's say, if you're guaranteed accuracy, we've had a customer who had 4 bodies in the customer service team, and they're doing a significant volume. Post Wave implementation, they could bring that down to 1, because no longer are you saying, look, I've received the wrong product, where's my order, etc., right? It is right through to the picking, is right through to labor. If you're working off a systemic process where literally you can, it's a tab, it's a tablet, it's a scanner, so you don't have to bring people in. There's no educational aspect to them. You can actually have a productive staff, bang, bring them in, high vis, give them a scanner, bang, follow the process, right? And you can actually see exactly what they're doing, the productivity, the top pickers, top packers, and what the total activity is of the day. Equally, when it comes to shipping, on the shipping side, the decision relative to what courier should be deployed against an order should never be left to warehouse. It just shouldn't. It's shipping tends to be one of the biggest suppliers to an e-com business. It certainly is a significant cost. And whereas that shipping option and relative to what courier should be applied against what order should be deployed on our shipping engine, where you can go up with the rules. So if order value is equal to X, if the order is going to Canada or going to Australia, or if it's free shipping and the customer hasn't elected to buy DHL or UPS or etc., well then our default shipper should be X, right? So it means that you're actually minding your cost, you're minding your margin through a managed shipping, managed process, right? Equally, for a lot of warehouses have very manual process. For example, in pharmacy, if you're selling over-the-counter medicines, for example, Calpol, etc., there's a statutory obligation to get that signed off by pharmacists. So, Wave has an inbuilt process where if an order comes in with that, you route it to the pharmacist, they approve it, they send it back to warehouse. So no longer do you actually have to have paper where you work off that kind of approval process. So it's about literally, and warehouses love it because if they don't have to stop to think, warehouses can do what they do really well, which is goods in, picking, packing, shipping, bang, bang, bang. And literally, once it's a seamless flywheel process, it's about making sure that all decision making is removed and you literally just follow the process. And in doing so, you're maximizing your margin, you're keeping your cost per order at the door as low as possible, and you have a much happier warehouse.
Brilliant. I might just wrap on the last one here, but I suppose you've touched on a lot of interesting points. I think you alluded to it there, Carol, as well. Like, just from working with Store Hero clients, I suppose, in the last 12 months, what we've seen is that kind of what you touched on to some extent is that, COVID happened, this explosion of e-commerce came. Yes, everyone's sales went through the roof. It was brilliant for a year or two. And now, that Facebook tax has come on and, the optimizations don't need to just be made in the ad account now. It's about the other areas of the business. Anyone who's looking to implement a product like this, they're trying to save cash. Have you any good examples of success stories from existing customers that have implemented the software and that have been able to free up that operating expense burden? Just for anyone listening, operating expenses, so your rent, software fees, your staff costs, that kind of thing. Has there been any material impacts on existing customers? You don't have to name them or anything like that, but any good case studies or success stories from businesses who've actually utilized the platform?
Yeah, for sure. At the moment, we're putting we're drawing off the ink on a case study where we've asked the CFO within the business to look at the cost of pre and post. and that number is coming out at 70%. So literally all that cost is very much a labor saving, right?
Wow.
Getting out the door. As I mentioned to you, a very big customer had 4 customer service team, and that customer service team was very much for post-sale activities. That was reduced by 75% because every single order is 100% accurate. Within the first 2.5 months, I sent out 60,000 orders through the platform, and only one was wrong, and that was because the packer picked up a wrong spurious product on the bench and sent it out. And so, the accuracy is guaranteed when a product's going out the door. So you think about the customer service element, think about your trust pilot score, and the great service you're giving to your customers. So there's, and equally, businesses that run the warehouse with Wave OMS is a more profitable business. It's as simple as that. You have the facility now for growth. You remove the dependency on key personnel. It's very much an autonomous process. There's no controller saying, go and do those 5 orders, go and do those 6 orders, etc. Your mispicks are gone, your accuracy is 100%. And equally, your staff retention. Staff are an awful lot happier. Where once you introduce a systemic process, what are they going to do? Are they going to, leave warehouse to go back into another warehouse where they're given a piece of paper and told to walk the legs off, right? So we have a saying that basically warehouse staff are for working, not walking. And we're constantly looking at refining the process to make sure that is continue to be a lived out reality.
There you go, folks. Every shitstorm is an opportunity. Thank you very much, Ciaran. That was brilliant. Honestly, thank you very, very much. We really enjoyed the day out in the warehouse there before Christmas, and really fantastic episode. I hope everyone got some value from it.